Hey everybody, how's it going this weekend? So this is my slideshow on the ethical perspective challenge presentation. So this is the scenario. So I did a little more digging aside from the article that we were provided, just kind of get a little more information on it. So it looks like in 2017, Officer Payne demanded a blood draw from an unconscious patient to determine if they had any chemical substances in their system. The patient was driving a tractor trailer and was crashed into by a speeding vehicle that was being chased by the police. The patient was flown to the hospital for burn treatment. Per the hospital policy, it states that blood draws cannot be performed for the police if the patient is unconscious unless they have consent, the person is under arrest, or the police have a warrant. Uh, the nurse, Wubbles, she refused to draw the blood due to none of the criteria being met, which ultimately resulted in the police officer arresting her despite being in violation of hospital policy. And Officer Payne was ultimately fired, and his commanding officer was demoted. But he stated that it was their policy to draw the blood, and it wasn't updated until after this incident happened. And he said that he would have just let it be, but his supervisor told him to arrest the nurse if she didn't draw the blood. So the nurse's point of view, the RN showed moral sensitivity in this situation. The first step of ethical decision making is recognizing that there is an ethical issue. She followed, she's following provisions of the Code of Ethics. Most notably, looking at number 6, the nurse through individual and collective effort establishes, maintains, and improves the ethical environment of the work setting and conditions of employment that are conclusive to safe, quality health care. And she did a very good job. You watched a video, and it's kind of really sad, seeing that she was pretty calm and had the backing of her management and everything, reading the policy to the police officer, but ultimately it still, events kind of went downhill from there. So the ethical perspective, think in this situation, um, she used altruism, which is love your neighbor, and in that, our actions are designed to help out others no matter the personal cost. You put the needs of others before your own, act as a role model, recognize the need to handle toxic emotions, etc. Um, and she was very professional throughout the whole ordeal with the police officer. She could have easily given him an attitude back, yet she, remained very professional, and she ultimately was arrested for advocating for the patient. The five timeless questions, net consequences. Obviously, she probably was weighing, if I violate the policy, I could get fired. If I draw the blood and the patient family, could have refused. Which could get her in trouble with a lawsuit. And then also, if she refused, getting in trouble with the police officer. So her core obligations, is following the procedure for the blood draw and, the policy, and it's, to get consent from family or for the police officer to get a warrant or place the patient under arrest. Um, so what will work, she was trying to reason with the police officer, find common ground to work around the problem, um, who we are, or who are we, excuse me. She's the nurse. Her duty is to the patient, and that's providing a safe atmosphere and following the policies and procedures of the organization, which she did. And what can she live with? She probably wasn't expecting to get arrested and for all that to happen. It certainly didn't seem like it, but ultimately, and I'm sure she doesn't, want to get fired or sued. So she just did her job. So the police officer's viewpoint, the police officer is stating that their policy was to get the blood draw, and it didn't change until after the situation happened. And he said that their policy was outdated at the time. Um, and then, the RN refusing might have been causing frustrations on his end. He's just trying to do his job. He's investigating this accident. And he probably could have his supervisor breathing down his throat and, telling him to arrest the nurse. And he's saying that his supervisor told him to arrest the nurse if she refused to do the blood draw. So this is the law enforcement code of ethics from Utah. Um, and, this is one of the biggest things that I think, or two of the things is use of force and discretion that he did not use. A police officer is to use his responsibility within the law, and discretion is vested in the position. Um, it's the principle of reasonableness guides the officer's conclusion. An officer considers all surrounding circumstances in determining whether any legal action will be taken. Consistent and wise use of discretion based on professional policing competence does much to preserve good relationships and retain the confidence of the public. And then, obviously, use of force. A police officer never employs unnecessary force or violence and uses only such force in the discharge of duty as is reasonable in all circumstances. Force is used only with greatest restraint and only after discussion, negotiation, and persuasion have been found to be inappropriate or ineffective. So again, watching that, grabbing her by the arm, dragging her outside, pinning her up against the wall, cranking her arm behind her back and stuff like that. Just for this situation, I personally feel just pretty uncalled for. So the police officer's ethical perspective in this situation, I felt kind of more aligned with pragmatism. In this approach rejects the use of abstract principles and instead believes ethical choices come via the use of inquiry. Approach ethical problems as you would other dilemmas. Embrace your emotions. This approach lacks a moral center and can lead to undesirable decisions. So here, embracing your emotions definitely seemed like his emotions got the best of him, and that led to him ultimately, I think, arresting her out of just frustration versus anything else. So the four-way method, truth. He's stating, the department policy is to get the blood sample. The person was involved in a motor vehicle accident, taken to the hospital where the sample can be collected. Consequences, the nurse can get in trouble if they violate the policy. He can get in trouble if he violates the policy or for not following the order of a supervisor. The fairness, solution taken in the situation does not enhance autonomy of parties involved, and likely does not treat others as the way the police officer would want to be treated. He definitely wasn't acting fair. I think he'd be pretty upset if that happened to him or his spouse. Character, ultimately by arresting the RN, his reputation, I think, took a hit. Obviously, he ended up getting fired. He acted by, acting less virtuous. Doesn't build a trusting relationship with the community. And then, disadvantages, have disagreement about the facts between parties and conflicting views, consequences, and fairness. So obviously, the disadvantages of the four-way method, this is a big one. Disagreement about the facts between parties and conflicting views of consequences. So obviously, she's saying this is the policy. He's saying that, my policy at the police department's different as far as the blood collection goes. And it ultimately led to, this conflict that they had, which kind of flew off the handle. So my view of the situation, I personally feel that the officer involved was wrong in this situation. The patient was just a party that was unintentionally involved in that accident. That was the result of the police chasing another vehicle. His vehicle was crashed into. It said that the person, I believe, that they were chasing ultimately died. And he obviously suffered burns that he had to be life flighted to the hospital and was unconscious. I definitely didn't think he used appropriate discretion in that scenario. the nurse was following the appropriate policy in terms of the blood draw. She was being professional. She was being courteous. She had her supervisors and everybody on the phone agreeing with her that this is the policy, to be followed. And, the officer, this, being that he was a detective, you're assuming that he had been with the department for at least, a decent bit of time. Um, he likely knew his supervisor telling him to arrest her if she didn't let him get the blood draw was uncalled for and unethical. Maybe emotions on his end might have gotten the better of him. He might could have just been frustrated. Could be, there's a lot of scenarios, towards the end of his shift, just wants to get home. But I mean, nothing that justifies his action. You know, if I was the police officer, if I was in his shoes, and I would have, if the supervisor wanted the blood draw that bad, I would have requested for them to come down and said, hey, she's not, this is their policy. She's refusing to give it. Can you come down and talk to her? Or, asked if if they could try to get a hold of family and get consent for the blood draw. So these are my references. I appreciate you listening in, and I hope you have a good day.